This is In Between Them, a podcast where we uncover what it really felt like to be a child of divorce. I am Shannon Darrow, and each episode brings honest stories from brave adults who lived through this as children. This is In Between Them. Let's get going. Hi, Stav. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Before we get started and kind of dive into everything, I just wanted to kind of get a little bit of feel for just who you are and where you've kind of evolved from. You know, I know that you grew up in Florida and we met, gosh, I don't really want to say 30 years
Don't
ago,
say it
but I
out
think
loud.
it's about, though we're not that old. I know that for sure. So it's been like 30 years and in Arizona, and then you ended up in New York City. And I know now that you're no longer in New York City, but you were for a long time.
Yeah.
So maybe just give us a little snapshot of the highlights of that path and where you are now.
Sure. So born and raised in Florida, Clearwater, Florida, then ended up at Arizona State, which is where I had the luxury of being your roommate for a little while. After Arizona, I had always wanted to move to New York City. Didn't really know anyone there. Just kind of packed the car up and headed out and started interviewing to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, which I'm still trying to figure out. But I ended up in finance. I worked at several banks in a research sales capacity on their trading floors. And then after many, many years of doing that, I got recruited over to one of my clients, which happened to be a large hedge fund, to do business development for them. And then went on to lead a team at another prominent hedge fund, doing business development for them and helping them build out one of their big equities businesses. That was all in New York. I was there for probably 25, 24 years before my family and I made the move to Southampton. So we're here full time, and I still go into the city once a week, but it's kind of nice to have the choice to have the big city life and then have the nature that we have around us here. So
Yeah. What is something that you miss about the city that maybe surprises you?
it doesn't surprise me. It's the food. The food. So
Yeah.
many good restaurants here.
Yeah.
Especially in the winter, it's sort of a summer vacation area where we live now. So there's only a select few restaurants, but I miss the food so much. But I also miss the culture. Like, I love that our kids have two children, one 8, one soon to be 6. And I love that they get the nature out here and they're outside all the time and they get to do all these things that they wouldn't do in the city. But they're also missing out on some of the culture of the city with the museums and the plays and just like the cool stuff kids can do in the city.
At least you can still get there fairly
Oh,
easily,
yeah.
you know.
We
So
we go
they
in.
kind of get
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of get both. It's a little bit more effort to go in 2 hours or so each way, but it's close enough where we can make it work.
Yeah. I get the whole living in a sleepy town thing. That's where I am. And, everything
Yeah.
shuts down at about 10 o'clock.
Yes.
So if you want
Yes.
something more, then you better pick a different place.
Exactly. Exactly. It's done wonders for my sleep and drinking, though.
Yes. Yes. I agree. And, there's something about doing that when you have kids because everybody going to bed a little bit earlier actually makes for a different way of life than if
Abnormal.
they were
Yes.
going to bed and you're staying up late. Yeah. So
Yeah. No, I
blessings in
agree.
disguise. Yeah,
I
for
agree.
sure. Well, like I said, thank you again for being here. And I just want to be respectful of your time and kind of dive into this. And, when I met you, I was aware that your parents were divorced, but from kind of that adult in college, what you were dealing with at that point. And it's funny, I realized, I never asked you anything about it. I don't know anything about anything that happened prior to that point in life, and it's just kind of funny how you just kind of pick up when you meet somebody even though you see things like that. So I'm interested and fascinated to hear your story also, just because
Yeah.
that's a part of your life that I don't know. So I think what I want to do is really just start by asking you, how old were you when your parents got divorced and how did that unfold? Like, what were you aware of? How were you made aware of it? Just kind of how did that come about?
Yeah. So I was young. So I was 4. My brother was 2. So we were very young when it happened. I don't remember a ton about it at the moment it happened, but it was very evident because we moved from Jacksonville, Florida, where my where we were living, and where I was born, and my father had a business there, to Clearwater, Florida, where my grandparents were. My mom just packed us up and we went and lived with our my grandparents. I think that was actually a huge blessing because while my dad wasn't there, I was so young, I don't know that I don't wanna say I didn't know to miss him because clearly as I grew up, I missed having him there, but I had my grandfather who was a huge, influence in our lives then, and so sort of like the father figure in the house, and, who doesn't love living with their grandparents?
Yeah.
So it was, like a still a very happy family-oriented sort of scenario. I don't think I really felt the effects of it until I sort of got older, and it's funny because people are always like, "Oh, it's easier when you're younger, it's easier when you're older." I don't think it's easy either way, I just think you go
Yeah.
through different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember the exact moment, but I remember just the move. Vaguely, I remember the move, and then it just was like it was always how
Yeah.
it how it was.
How for people that don't know, how far is it, like, driving between Jacksonville and Clearwater?
Yeah, it's about 4 hours, so it's not that far. You have Jacksonville on one coast of Florida and then Clearwater kind of in the middle on the other on the Gulf Coast. So
Okay.
it wasn't that far, but, we had to depend on my dad to come and get us, and I will say, like, he wasn't that great about, sticking with the schedule of, coming and seeing us, and I just remember growing up, there were a lot of hurt feelings about, him saying he'd be somewhere and not being there, and, he wasn't great about child support, so I had a single mom who was very smart, but, working her ass off, to be honest with you, and doing the best she could. But it wasn't like we had a lot of money growing up. So my grandmother and grandfather were a huge help from
Yeah.
from that
Yeah.
aspect. Yeah, too.
Was there I have other thoughts, but I wanna go back to being young and that happening. Do you remember, I mean, probably a little while after you moved, do you remember at a point realizing that your parents were divorced? Because I feel like
Yeah.
at some point that had to become clear, and then what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I distinctly remember in kindergarten being the only family that had the only one having a divorced parent. We went to a Baptist private school, even though we're Greek Orthodox. We went to a Baptist private school, and I was the only one who had a had
Wow.
divorced parents. Um, I don't remember, like, kids being mean about it. I really remember it, like, striking me, like, my first, um, like, thoughts about it were when it would be like, I was in middle school and it would be, I was a cheerleader and it would be like the father-son basketball game, but the cheerleaders' dads could come too, and, like, mine
Wow.
wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like, it was things like that that actually, I think, first hit me about it.
Yeah.
I think there was always, like, a little bit of a disappointment, like, if we were supposed to go to him that weekend and we didn't, but I don't remember those until I was in middle school and older. And then when I was 16, I was old enough to drive, and I actually was the one who put my brother in the car, and we would go to Jacksonville. My mom would be
Wow.
so paranoid that I was driving 4 hours, but we were like, "If he's not gonna come to us, we want the relationship, we're gonna go to him."
So was that driven by you and your brother being like, if he's not going to come to us, we're going to make this happen? Because that's
Yeah,
very uncommon, I think, for kids to
yeah.
facilitate that, especially if they have to drive 4 hours.
Yeah, yeah. In high school, you have other things you wanna be doing.
Yes.
No, I think it was, when, we did see, we had the best time with him. Like, he has since passed away, unfortunately, but, like, he was larger than life. Like, he was sort of one of those people that everybody was drawn to him. So, it was strange because when we were with him, it would always be like, "Everything's fine, we're okay," because he's so much fun. And, he, had a thriving business. He, went out on he was like a big boater, Greek, so he was a big boater, so we would always, like, be out on the boat with him. We would just do fun and different things with him, but it was almost like when we were younger, we sort of forgave him for all the times he didn't show up.
Hmm.
And I would say my mom was I don't know how she did this, but she never said a bad word about him, no matter how
Wow.
much he upset her for upsetting us, right?
Yeah.
But she never spoke a bad word about him, which I think left us open to being like, okay, well, we want this relationship with him.
Yeah.
So I think it was, a little different than maybe some,
Yeah, for sure.
more, what's the word I'm looking for? Some divorces that are a little bit more like not
High
so great.
conflict. Yeah, yeah. Have you ever spoken to her about her ability to be that way and how that I mean, that clearly had a very positive impact, but from even a personal perspective, I mean, that's a very hard position to be in to just, keep all your cards to yourself with your kids. Have
Incredibly
you ever
hard. Incredibly hard. Like, I don't know that we actually ever, like, really spoke about it. I think, like, the times we did, it would be, like, when I was older and she was like, "I just knew one day you'd figure things out for yourself, and I didn't wanna be the person to, you know, be the deciding factor on whether or not you had a relationship with him." I mean, I think it's very hard. I feel like I have mixed feelings on that. On one side, I feel like that was the reason we had a relationship with him as we got older. On the other hand, there was cheating involved. Like, so I feel like I'm sort of like, did my mom, was she sort of like a wallflower about it? Like, did she just like let that happen? And I think she's always still loved him, and so I feel like maybe that was a little bit of her not standing her ground. I don't know
Mhm.
which way to look at it, right?
Yeah,
Because it's not like she didn't stand her ground. She left him, right? So she
yeah,
did stand her ground, but
yeah,
then and the way she handled it enabled us to have the relationship. So I
yeah,
I sometimes think about it like, was she being a pushover? But I think
yeah.
like in the grand scheme of things, I'm very grateful for the way she handled it.
Yeah, and maybe she was actually being both, but the
Yeah.
benefit of it was that you guys were able to have this relationship
Yeah.
and have it in your own way. And, we all see our parents become people as we get
Right.
older.
Right.
And she afforded you that ability to make up your own mind at
Yeah,
a younger age,
definitely.
and to see that. So I do know he got remarried, your dad,
Okay.
right? And
Okay.
had more
Good point.
kids. How did that how did that like everything has sounded so positive that in the
Yeah.
earlier part maybe you didn't see him as much, and I don't know how much you actually like when he said he would come and he wouldn't, would he make it up, or did you like how many times throughout a year, maybe between when you started driving up there and
Yeah.
early, did you actually see him, and like how were holidays? But then at what point did he all of a sudden get remarried and then have more kids, and then what did that do?
Yeah. So it's actually like I thought about this after he passed away. I never spent a holiday with him, which was really sad now that he's not here
Wow.
to spend a holiday with, right?
Yeah.
So you have that extra dynamic of him not being around anymore, which is hard when you think back on that. I think
Mhm.
it's harder now than it is now that I have kids, like,
Yeah.
like it feels harder. I guess when we were little, we just like maybe I'm blocking it out, but I don't remember it ever being like a focal point for me. I mean, we saw him like a few times a year, but it was like a few times a year. It wasn't like
Yeah.
regular. It wasn't like once a month or anything like that. It would go months without seeing him. So it felt more like, it didn't feel like it was like the norm to see him. It felt like it was like a treat to see him because it was not that often. He got remarried. I mean, I think I was in middle school. I must have been in late middle school, early high school. I should know that. Forgetting. And he had two sons, my two half brothers. And like at that age, you're like secretly hoping he doesn't have another girl. So you can be the only girl.
We
So, I
won
mean, we
that.
were little, we were little, we were little, and, he had 2 boys, which was much harder on my brother than it was on me
Yeah.
because I was still the only girl. I was the oldest, like, it was just, felt different for me than it did,
Yeah.
but it was certainly, like, it was tough on both of us, like, they got him 24/7, right? And we were struggling for money, they were not, and so it was, like, a really crazy dynamic. We would go to my dad's house, and it would be this, like, beautiful giant home with, like, a giant boat in the docked in the back, and, like, then we'd go home, and we'd be, like, toys for tots for Christmas. Like, it was like a very dramatic, very, very dramatic, like, difference between the 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there was certainly some, like, especially on my brother's part, like, my 2 half brothers are much younger than I am. One is, like, 17 years younger, and the other is, like,
Yeah.
12 or something like that, you know? So, I was also so much older that it didn't affect me in the same way. Eli also was older, but I just think it was, like, the boy thing, you
Yeah,
know?
all of it probably. When you had that kind of different dynamic from house to house, and you're seeing, everything that your mom is going through. At that point, did you still live with your grandparents, or at some point did you guys?
We moved out and my mom, had, like, really gotten on her feet. She was a teacher when she was married to my dad, and then she went into real estate, was doing great commercial real estate. Then in the '80s with the crash, the firm company she was with went under, and my mom has a PhD. Like, she's, like,
Wow.
smart cookie, but she, couldn't find a job. It was the '80s, and she couldn't find another job. She ended up going to work at Dillard's, the department store.
Wow.
Which is crazy because she could not be more overqualified for that, but, like, that hit us, so we moved out, and then we had to move back in with my grandparents, which was,
Wow.
like, a real blow, right? Like, she finally gets on her feet, and we're doing
Yeah.
great, and then back in
I
we
mean,
go.
what was your perspective then, or even as you look back on just that lifestyle difference and the
Yeah,
luxury that your dad is living in and what your mom is struggling to do? There's
yeah.
so many beautiful lessons in what your mom
Oh
was
my
doing,
god.
but
So
the
many.
perspective is a hard one, especially when you're young, and
Yeah.
how that had to have impacted you in many ways.
I think I started paying attention more to, like, what my friends had that I didn't. Like, we also went to this private school, and people had money at the school, and, like, my best friends had, like, trampolines in their backyard that was, like, seemed, like, so cool to me at the time, and they had these beautiful homes, and I think I started paying attention at a very young age to the differences, like, my reality versus other people's realities.
Mhm.
Like, I remember being young and looking through, like, a Town and Country magazine, and in the back, they used to have all these listings of these, like, gorgeous homes in Connecticut, right? And I remember, like, tearing them out and, like, keeping them,
Yeah.
almost like a, I guess, nowadays vision board, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um, I
Wow.
just vividly remember that, and when my mom first started in real estate, like, she was doing residential, and I would go with her, and, like, especially when she had the bigger houses, and I would, like, she would have an open house and I would be in the house. I would be, like, going room to room, thinking about what I changed, pretending like I lived there. So, like, it was like it impacted me
Yeah.
in knowing, like, I didn't wanna be in the situation that I was in when I was little, like, when I grew up. Like, it was
Yeah.
just a thing that was just not gonna it wasn't gonna be an option that was gonna
Yeah.
work.
What's interesting though is it doesn't seem, and unless, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to have contributed to incredibly negative feelings about your dad, in because you mentioned like
Yeah,
he wasn't great about child support. So clearly there was a
yeah.
contribution there that wasn't being made,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's strange because I feel like I guess, like, it goes back to his, like, magnetism and, like, his salesman abilities, and, like, I think that that sort of, like, won most people over. There were times where I was very angry with him, especially, like, in college. I did not get along with his 2nd wife at all growing up, which is funny because she still texts me today and we, like, still, like, say
Wow.
Merry Christmas, and she calls my kids her grandkids, which is hilarious. But
Wow.
growing up, it was very, I think my mom had a bigger problem with her because, like, I wasn't allowed to have bangs, but then I'd go to my dad's and my stepmother would be like, "Do you wanna go get bangs?" Or, like, I wasn't allowed to have a bikini. I'd go to my stepmother and she'd be like, "Let's buy a bikini." Like, it was almost like she was,
Mm,
like,
mhm.
angling for everything I wasn't allowed to do at home.
Yeah.
So, we had a tougher, I think I kinda made her, well, she didn't help herself, but we sort of, like, took our anger out on her, and then as I got older in college even, I paid my way through college, and all my dad had to do was the meal plan, and, like, the meal plan wasn't getting paid. So then, as you know, I, like, got a job. I worked, like, at 5 different places during college. including the tax office that you and I worked at. So thanks for that job. But I remember getting very, very angry with him and, like, calling him and yelling at him. I
Yeah.
also remember one time where he didn't show up when I was in middle school and calling at him and yelling at him and being like, "This isn't right. What you're doing is not okay." Like, even middle school, like, "This is how it's making me feel." Tears
Yeah.
everywhere. So it wasn't that I was afraid to tell him I was upset with him. I just think, like, it made him feel bad in the moment, but then we didn't see each other for so long. It was
Yeah.
almost like, "So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna still stay mad and then not see him again?"
Yeah.
Like, because
Yeah.
that's always an option. You just never knew. Like, am
Yeah.
I maybe not gonna see him again if I
Yeah.
don't let this go, right?
Do you think, I mean, you are, sounds like very direct with him from a young
Yeah,
age,
yeah,
which is actually a great thing because I think, obviously it's such a complicated situation, but I think so many problems also stem from when everybody suppresses their emotions on
yeah,
all
yeah,
levels. Fostering that directness and asserting yourself and not being afraid to like say this hurt my feelings at a
yeah.
young age. Do you think that came about because of your relationship with him? Or do you think that's kind of, you just always were like that? And so then when things happen with him, it just came out to him too?
It's a good question. I don't know. I feel like if you ask my mom, I've always been like that. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. But I would say that it certainly, like, I got practice at a young age, like, saying how I felt, right? And my mom was never like, "Well, don't say that to him." My mom was like, "Tell him. If that's the way you feel, then you need to tell him." So I think, like, it was encouraged, like, for me to not just be a wallflower. I
Mhm.
think, yeah, I can't, I mean, I'd have to go very, very far back in time to remember a
Yeah.
time where I wasn't saying exactly.
I'd say it's probably who you are. But then what a great skill because that probably helped you create a better relationship with him that was at least based on
Yeah,
real emotions, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And that's probably a
And he
gift.
knew. I mean, he knew, like, when he was sick, he had lung cancer. He was diagnosed and passed away within 4 months. It was very fast. But I actually was his healthcare surrogate. Like, I was the person he put in charge, not his current wife at the time, not any of my brothers. So I was in charge of taking care of him, and I left work to take care of him at a very difficult time for me to leave. It was in the middle of a merger, and my company was not benefiting from the merger, even though we were the company that took them over. And so they were looking to get rid of people on our trading floor, and so it was a difficult time for me to be like, "Hey, I'm taking a few weeks, and I'm going to go make sure my dad's all set up." And I would say before he passed away, I remember him, like, saying, I'm sorry, like, it was
Wow.
sucked.
Mm.
Sorry. But,
Oh,
like, it wasn't that he didn't know. I
yeah.
think he also, like, I don't know, he was maybe like a out of sight, out of mind, didn't
Yeah.
know how to deal with little kids. You could throw a lot of excuses at it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it right, but he knew. So,
Which had to give you some peace and comfort, even though it doesn't change it, take it back, fix it,
yeah,
anything. But I think
yeah,
sometimes when someone acknowledges a way that
yeah,
that wasn't great, even if there's nothing you can do, there's some, sense of just validation
yeah,
in
yeah,
the way you felt.
definitely, definitely.
And I think that's an important piece because I do think that there's so many
Yeah,
children who grow up in divorced families, and so many things happen when they're young, and so many are not able to talk about it later. But the healing
yeah,
that can come from just simple acknowledgement, it's like, unless people want to go and, everybody goes through therapy together or people do their own work, that's a whole
right,
nother level of processing and all of that. But acknowledgement is a huge piece, especially when you were a kid. And I think a lot of kids feel like they're invalidated because of the fact that they are a
yeah,
kid, as if their feelings really didn't hold as much weight as the adults or whatever. And so getting that from him, I can imagine was a hard but beautiful moment, you
yeah.
know?
No, it was, just acknowledgement, like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I was probably a shitty dad, but, like,
Yeah.
it," you know,
Do
it was
you
it was yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Do you
Sorry.
think I'm glad you no, I'm glad you got that from him. I think that's
Yeah,
a pivotal moment in life, that
yeah.
probably helped you more than you realized at the time for sure,
No,
maybe
definitely,
looking back.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely, and it makes me, like, think back on, like, all it makes me be able to want more of those great moments with him, but think about the great moments that we had as I got older, so
Yeah.
because in college, I became pretty close with him and
That's
after,
what I was gonna ask you.
yeah.
Like, when did you feel like you really were able to establish a more consistent relationship with him? Was it after college?
It was right after college. I went to like, during college, I went to Greece with him a few times, and it was, like, trips that it was just he and I,
Yeah.
and so those trips became, like, a regular thing for us. I mean, I couldn't go for the whole summer like he would go for, like most Greeks go for, because I had a job, but it that's when it started happening, like, where we would talk to each other more, I would call him more, he would call me every once in a while. He still never really like, that just wasn't his thing, but, like, I would call him, I would, like, bounce work stuff off of him. He never understood what I did no matter how many times I told him, but, like, um, it became more of a, an everyday conversation by any means, but much more frequent than it had been.
I think that is a really big deal because as you were saying this, I was thinking as I have a 12-year-old and I've recently been going, okay, I have him for 6 more years.
Yeah,
You like don't realize how fast it goes. And then all of a sudden,
true.
when you realize they're actually going to go on and have their life, you have less than half of them with you. And so you start to realize that. And you actually it if people
It
I
doesn't have
think
to
could
stop there.
what?
It doesn't have to stop there,
No,
right?
no,
Like,
no, and not that it
it
does, but I think what I'm thinking is you get to have and establish this whole relationship with your children as adults. And depending on your childhood, their childhood with you or your own with your own parents, you can establish something different. And I think of a lot of people who maybe their parents did divorce terribly. And so
yeah,
their childhood was hard. It doesn't have to mean that then as adults you just have to keep that going. I mean, if both people want, you can establish a relationship later. You obviously have to do
yeah,
things to make it happen and
yeah,
put work into it, but if you haven't been able to do that, it doesn't mean that you've lost your chance and you're kind of
not at
stuck with
all,
what you have. And
not at
the
all.
fact that you guys were able to do that post college,
Yeah, yeah,
is a beautiful thing and a
yeah,
really I think it should be a light for people who are struggling in that childhood phase, or maybe it's a difficult divorce where they just can't get it to a point where they feel like they're good with their kids for whatever reasons, that there is another phase, and that
yeah.
doesn't mean write it off, but it just means keep
No,
hope,
I keep
keep
hope.
hoping.
I mean, someone's gonna have to be willing to be like, "This is annoying because I'm the only one." It's kind of like with a friend. You move away and then you don't talk to them anymore, and one friend is making the effort while the other friend is like,
Right.
"Life is busy," but life's busy for everyone, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's sort of like that. You have to take the mentality that like, "Okay, if I want this, then it may all fall on me and maybe one day it'll change." I think as long as you're not getting like taken advantage of
Right.
and you're willing to put that work in, then yeah, you could, like there were many times where I was like, "Why aren't you calling me?" Like it's not like it was all like,
Yeah.
"It's
Yeah.
fine. I'll just call you. You don't have to do anything." There was frustration with that, but I think if you want it, then you just keep at it, you know?
Yeah, and I think too what's jumping out at me also is you did have I mean, I was privy to some difficult moments in college,
Yeah.
but even so, like, you clearly had moments all throughout,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
you somehow kept thinking bigger, and it also is a great example of, maybe life in general, but in the context of what we're talking about is you can have these difficult moments because of these situations and then how the dynamic creates these individual relationships between parents and kids, but ultimately there is a bigger picture, there is a bigger relationship, and you
Yeah.
somehow were able to go, you know when I was younger, my dad would say he's coming and then he didn't come. And then you had all these
Yeah.
other things. And somehow it's like you had this built in forgiveness for him that you were just going to get to a better place or you were going to keep trying because
Yeah.
that was more important to you than holding on to some of the things. And that's not to say that you forgave everything and there
Yeah.
weren't crappy things he did,
Yeah.
but I think big picture is really, I mean, it's really a neat thing that you were able to establish a relationship with him because he passed early. So you were able to do that, in
Yeah.
a way that gave you that time.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how it would have I don't know what I would have felt had we not had at least some time where we
Yeah.
were on great terms, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think, looking back to, like once you kind of were able to connect with him, do you feel like it changed the way that you approached relationships in life? Coming from that and seeing the difficulty between your parents, not that you're saying like your mom didn't talk bad about your
Yeah.
dad, but still, you obviously knew it wasn't great. And then getting to know him better and seeing all the things your mom went through, like how do you think that impacted you going into relationships?
Yeah. I you know what's funny? I don't know if it this is gonna sound weird, but, like, I don't know if it impacted me, like, in terms of, like, the relationships I got into. I think it impacted me and my own what I wanted for myself, like, and what I was gonna provide for myself. I
Mhm,
think I think I didn't think about it so much when I was dating or when I got married. I think I thought about it more like, okay, well, I'm never going to be in that situation. I'm going to work hard and not depend on anybody else. And I think my dad had an excellent work ethic. And I do think even though I didn't grow up with him, like I knew he was in the store before any of his employees sweeping the floors, like, doing the grunt work, like, he was never above anything, and I think that the combination of seeing, like growing up and seeing, like this may sound materialistic, but, like, seeing what he had and what we didn't, seeing how hard my mom was working, but then seeing how hard my dad was working and then getting all this stuff, like, I think it affected, like, what I was willing to settle on for myself that I was gonna provide myself
mhm,
versus, like, who I dated. I know
yeah.
that sounds weird. I don't think it
No.
affected my relationships. I think it affected, like, me.
Well, it probably did indirectly, right? You
Maybe. Yeah.
decided, "I'm going to be totally self-sufficient
Yes.
because of what I've seen," and then anyone who you dated had to accept that, and I don't think you've
Yeah.
ever
Well,
been
that's
able
fair.
to, you're not wavering, like, you've never wavered off of that, and it's,
Yeah.
look at what I mean, you have been incredibly successful, and so it has it has worked and probably brought to you people that will support
Are
that,
okay with that.
you
Yeah.
know?
No,
Yeah,
that's fair. That's very
yeah,
fair. That's
yeah,
very fair.
yeah. I mean, I think that there was no way it wasn't gonna impact you, and I think
Yes.
seeing
Yeah.
it would just neat to see
Well,
that it's resulted the way
actually,
it has.
that is one thing that I feel like is a non-negotiable for me is, like, you know, if somebody says they're gonna do something and they don't do it, that's, like, a non-negotiable for me, and I think
Yeah,
that that probably came out of it. Like, there's always times where you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna take the kids to the playground," and I always say to my husband, "If you're not gonna take them to the playground, don't mention the playground." Like, it is like a
yeah,
stickler for me, like, even on small things. So I guess, that's like a
yeah.
standard that I will not negotiate on, and I
Well,
think that is
that's a
very much
huge
so because
yeah,
of
yeah.
the way that I grew up.
Yeah, and I mean, what a wonderful way to be consistent for your kids, I
Yeah.
mean, we all love to say, "Sure, I'll take you to the park," and then you're like,
Yeah,
"I really don't wanna go to the
yeah.
park
No, I
again,"
don't wanna
you
go to the
know?
park.
Yeah,
Sometimes I wanna go, but yeah.
yeah, but when you think about it from, like, we're just trying to be consistent and show up for our
Yeah,
kids as best we can, that's a really big way to do it, and to have the wherewithal to not say it if you can't do it.
yeah, yeah,
Because everyone's gonna be disappointed in life and kids will figure that out, but, like, if you
right.
aren't the source of that as often as you can
Yeah,
be, then that's a good thing, which is what I was gonna ask you is, how does it impact you differently from a parenting perspective? And actually, you know, being a unit for your kids because you didn't have that,
Yeah.
and I think that's probably, enlightening in some ways when you're like, wow,
Yeah,
there's
for
two of
sure.
us that get to do everything and split
Yeah.
everything and share everything.
Yeah. And I guess I'm my husband Mark is like a very active participant. Like he is, he comes up with fun things for the kids to do. He's like a very active member. He does drop off almost every morning. Like it's complete opposite of what I had growing up. He's incredibly active. And so like maybe that, you never know when you get married like how active you think somebody,
Yeah.
will
Right.
be,
Yeah.
but it's actually turned out that he's very present.
Well, and
So,
you having the awareness of that appreciation for that
yeah.
is probably a pretty special component to your marriage because we all wish we appreciated everything, right? But we
Right.
get busy and we forget or we overlook or we get complacent. But just kind of having that constant awareness that, like, I didn't have this and these kids get this
That's
because
it.
this person is
Yeah,
there or because we're both there
yeah.
is it's a really big deal.
It's funny, sometimes I actually get annoyed with my kids, like, very frustrated that they, like, don't understand how good they have it,
Yeah.
which is like, they're small, like, they'll get it one
Yeah.
day, but it's like,
Yeah.
you have no concept that this isn't like a give it, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you get lucky that you get this, you don't just get it.
And that's a whole nother conversation on how
Yeah,
to give them that
yeah,
perspective.
yeah. If you figure that
Yeah.
out, please let me know.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the
All
same.
ears,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
ears.
So, your situation is it's unique in that you didn't have this very consistent time with your dad young, but you were able to establish a really good relationship before he
Yeah,
passed. Do you think, the fact that you guys are all very Greek, do you
yeah,
think that the culture, because that is such a family culture, it is such
yeah,
a, like, we might yell and scream at each other, but that's not
yeah,
breaking anything. Do
yeah.
you think that had something to do with the fact that you just never kind of gave up?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I mean, I laughed when you said you're always yelling at each other because my husband says that we only speak in yelling, like it's like the tone. And when he first met my family, he was like, "Oh my God, everyone's so mad at each other." And then he had to get to know, like, no, they're just having conversation. That's how they talk.
Right.
So loud. Okay, wait, we're sorry. I lost track of the question
Well, I
now.
just was wondering if because that's such a rich culture and
Yes.
it's such a family-oriented culture. And so a lot of times when kids have been not as connected to their parent as a young person,
Yeah.
it's very harder to bridge that gap later. It's not or very hard, sorry. It's not that you can't do it, but it's
Yeah.
hard. And it seemed like it was just more natural for you for some
Yeah.
reason.
So I think it's a few things. We have a huge family. And I would say that my dad had 7 brothers and sisters. My mom has 2, but like the cousins and it goes on forever. So both sides of the family are pretty big. And I think that we never lost touch with my dad's side of the family. I have like 16 first cousins and like
Oh
we
my
were all
god.
around the same, well, some are younger, but like there were a lot of us that were around the same age and it wasn't like we were just like cut off from them. So we still had like a family kind of dynamic even though it wasn't as frequent. But then my grandfather was the priest of our church in Clearwater and we were part of a very large Greek community. And it almost felt like they were an extension of our family. Like we were all at each other's houses. Like all of the parents could punish the kids the same way as if they were their own. Like there were like, Greek women reporting back on every single thing that you did. And so I think that like it's a combination of we had a big family that we didn't lose touch with and we had a big community that was also like very hands-on. So
Yeah.
I think those 2 things kind of made it like I don't remember feeling like lonely as a kid. Like outside of the normal like,
Yeah. Yeah.
growing up things, but I think, like, there was just I think the community as a whole, like, really helped us not feel like we were missing that.
Yeah, and a lot of that is being Greek, but I think if
Yeah, but I
people
think
can
it's
hear
everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say, if people can hear the significance in that, it's that you weren't cut off from
Right,
family,
right.
And I think that, again, this whole point of what I'm doing is to try and help people see what impacts their kids that they're not thinking of,
Yeah,
and that maybe can motivate them to kind of regulate their own emotions and do what's really, truly
yeah.
right for their kids. And so some of that is not cutting off the other side's family. Like, there are
Hard.
times when that's
Yes, it
necessary
yeah,
or that then it's not
100%.
healthy or whatever. But
Right.
when it is healthy and what's holding people back is just anger or
Yeah,
emotional obstacles for the adults in it, that there is something to be said for allowing the children to still feel connected to a
yes,
larger group of people that
yeah,
love them, are related to them, and all of that. And from just what you're saying in general, like just church wise, is keeping kids a part of something that feels bigger than
yes,
themselves too.
yeah,
Because I think, like, to your point, yes, all kids feel lonely at times, but giving them outlets where maybe it's not their parents, but there are other people that they're comfortable with around. If a kid does begin to feel something, that they have more people to talk to,
yeah.
because not
I think it's
kids
huge.
aren't always going to go to their parents.
No,
And so giving them all of that support
especially if
when,
you see their parents struggling, or
yes,
their parents
yes,
are mad or sad or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
I would say that even out here, we've been here full time for not even 3 years yet. And there are some families at the school that are going through divorce, and we're like a small group, like a small
yeah,
community. You would think it would be, like, harder, but instead, I almost feel like everyone is just, like, enveloping
yeah.
the
Oh,
children that are going through that, and I it feels like back to the community thing, like, who
yeah.
knows how it turns out for them, but it certainly doesn't seem from the outside that it's from a lack of, you know, trying
Support.
to support, right, from a
Yeah,
lack of support,
yeah,
and I think that, it's easier in a smaller place, but
yeah, yeah.
or maybe, there's pluses and minuses to both, but
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think it comes down to the two parents and
right.
what they can admit is valuable to
Yeah.
their children, even if it's inconvenient for them or
Right.
not doesn't feel great for
Yeah.
them, but
Hard to
ultimately
do.
realizing, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wish that parents would realize, kind of like what you said about your mom, the greatest gift that she maybe didn't even think was going to be the case in her not saying anything bad about your dad was that you ended up exploring that entire relationship on your own, feeling supported by her doing it. But
Yeah.
on the flip side, everything she had to like bite her tongue about or
Oh
not
my
say,
god. Bigger
and like,
person than I think I would have been. That's so hard.
I know. And
So
it's
hard.
that is an amazing ability, but
Yeah.
she saw why that was important, and she knew that she could go bitch to her friends, she could
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
complain to whoever, but it didn't need to be your problem,
Right.
And I think that, there are lots of people that involve their children or make their children aware of things too
Right.
much to where their children almost feel like
They have to take a side. Yeah.
take a side, or they have to grow up and now be
Yeah.
like
Well,
kind of like a mini adult
yeah.
because now they know the adult problems.
Yeah.
It's just, hopefully hearing this and other stories, it's just really important for people to really, like I heard a lawyer say, there are consequences to divorce that you cannot escape. You
Right.
cannot create your next chapter to be the ideal fantasy that you want because there are consequences to divorce. And one of those are the impacts on your kids. So you
Yeah.
get to choose if you impact them further or do your absolute best to impact them as little as possible because they will be impacted.
I
But
mean,
if you
they're
can do it less,
probably the ones that take the brunt, like, you can
you totally
move
do.
on, right? You can get remarried, you can
Yes. Have
have
more
another
kids.
life. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
sort of like they are the ones who feel it more than
Yeah.
no matter how bad it feels in the moment,
Yeah.
like, they're the ones
Yeah.
that face the
They can't
repercussions.
escape it.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
And I wish, you know, that's a big piece of what I want to come out of this is kids cannot escape their parents' divorce, but
Yeah,
parents get to. Literally, they're divorcing.
yeah,
They are
yeah,
escaping, you know?
yeah,
And so what you're left with as the kid is how your parents handle it and
Yeah.
and then how you're able to navigate it. So I mean, there's so many pieces to this that I
So
think it
many pieces.
and I started by thinking, wow, you have a very unique situation, but there's a lot to pull out from it as
Yeah.
lessons from a bigger picture. And I'm so happy for you that you had those years with him before he
Yeah.
passed.
Thanks.
You
Me
know,
too. Yeah.
that's a really life-changing,
Yeah.
to
For
have that
sure.
time with him. Yeah.
For sure. And
Yeah.
I think he would have been a great grandfather, way better grandfather than dad. So,
Probably, yes.
I'm gonna
Requires
at
a
least
little
say that in
less.
my head, right?
Yes. Oh, he absolutely would have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would
Yeah.
have been.
So now, one last question, your relationship with
Yeah.
your half brothers, are you guys all close? Are you
Yeah.
connected? How is that kind of continued after your dad's passing?
Yeah, so I would say there was listen, I feel like with any family, there's always drama. I think my brothers are not close anymore. My full brother and my half brothers are not close. I think a lot of stuff like shook out after my dad got divorced or got after he passed away. That everyone always feels slighted. I don't even know if it I'm sure there was a lot of built up resentment between the boys that, came pouring out after. And my dad was kind of the one like keeping everybody in line. And then there was no one that was doing that anymore. I am very close with my one brother, Leo, and my other brother, Gio, the youngest one. Recently, he's going through something, so it's been a little bit more difficult. But prior to that, he would come and live with us. Like he literally came and
Wow.
lived with me for like 6 months at a time, a few years in a row. And
Wow.
he and I were thick as thieves. So I would say I he had it really rough because when my dad passed away, he was only 15, which is
Wow.
crazy. And so I think he probably got the worst
Yeah.
of it, right? And I think he's dealing with some of that stuff still today. But yeah, there was a point where my three brothers and I were all very close. I think like the boys have their separate issues,
Yeah.
but for me, it was, I've always considered them my
Yeah.
brother's brothers. Like I usually just introduce him as my brother.
Yeah. Well, maybe over time you kind of become that hub for all three of them,
Yeah.
as people
Yeah. I think there
grow
was
and
a
learn.
time where I think, drama
Yeah. That's
now,
life,
but
right?
hopefully it goes back to that again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's all you can just keep trying,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
in that place for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty
Well, I
persistent, so hard
yes,
to get rid of.
all of that directness, now you just need to channel it towards them.
I mean, it's good and it's
God.
bad sometimes, yeah.
Yes. Oh my god. Using it for good for sure. Well, I thank you so much
Yeah,
for your
great.
time. And I want to end every podcast with something completely irrelevant but
Okay.
interesting from everyone. And so my last question is, what is your most recent wonderful book that you have read?
Oh my god. All right. Well, I would say, my gosh, I love anything Kristen Hanna. You're
Do
gonna
you just bawl crying
I do,
every
and I
time?
just
It's
bawl.
unbelievable.
It is ball. It's like I just feel like I should come up with something happier, but I
I
mean,
know.
I read Broken Country and I thought it was wonderful,
Oh, okay.
but I just love a Kristen Hanna book.
Yeah. I I could
Absolutely love.
completely agree.
And I actually loved Remarkably Smart Creatures.
What's that?
Smart,
Remarkably
Remarkably Smart.
smart creatures?
Oh my god, it was so good. It's about an octopus, and I have this newfound obsession
What?
with octopus. Yeah, it's
Oh
so
my god.
good.
I have to look that up. All right.
Beautifully smart creatures. Maybe I'm thinking of the it's beautifully thinking creatures. Yeah, I
It
don't know why I'm
probably
blanking.
won't be hard to find the book about the
No, it
octopus.
won't. It was like a bestseller. Like you find it. It's maybe like a few years old. I loved
Okay.
it.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that. I am constantly reading and I just thought that's a great way to end
Yeah.
sometimes of a heavy podcast. So thank you
Yes.
for sharing
Yes. Yeah.
and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thanks for tuning in. Together we can shape healthier paths for families to do divorce better. See you next time on In Between Them.